All right, ready to dive into some serious history.
Let's do it.
Today, we're tackling the Chola Dynasty.
Oh, a fascinating one.
They were this maritime empire, ruled the waves around South India, and a big chunk of Southeast Asia.
Yeah, from the 9th to the 13th century CE, impressive run.
And get this, they weren't just landlubbers. Masters of the sea, these guys.
Totally. Their naval power, it really shaped their whole empire.
I mean, how did they get so strong at sea?
Well, for one, their ships, cutting edge for their time.
Like fancy boats or something.
More than fancy, massive.
Yeah.
Carried tons of cargo, troops, gave them a real edge in trade and war.
So, like, the super tankers and aircraft carriers of their day.
Exactly. And their sailors, navigators, top-notch, could handle the open ocean, no problem.
They went pretty far right.
Oh, yeah. Expeditions all the way to Sumatra, Malaya, modern-day Malaysia, basically. Imagine that journey back then.
No GPS, no fancy tools, yikes.
And all that naval power, it wasn't just for show. It fueled their economy.
So, like, controlling the seas meant controlling the trade routes.
You got it. And those spice and gold routes, crisscrossing the Indian Ocean, very lucrative.
So they basically built an empire on trade.
Yeah, you could say that. But they weren't just passive traders. They were shaping the whole economic scene.
So they had bigger ambitions than just buying and selling.
Oh, for sure. Controlling those key routes, it gave them power, wealth, like few others could match.
And I'm guessing that ambition pushed them into Southeast Asia.
It definitely played a part. I mean, a powerful navy like that, it's tempting to use it, right?
Rocket understand all that.
But the sources show it wasn't just about conquering. Economics was key. Controlling those spices, gold, other valuable stuff, that's how you gain an edge.
So more like strategic maneuvering.
Yeah, like a high-stakes game of maritime chess. They weren't just conquerors, they were thinkers, strategists.
Smart move.
Mm-hmm.
But they held on to that power for a long time.
Right, centuries. That says a lot about their skill, their vision.
It's incredible to think a kingdom from South India projecting power so far.
It really is.
So they conquer territories, set up trade, but what next? Just impose their rule and that's it.
Not at all. They were actually really good at integrating those new territories.
How so?
Clever administration they had, blended central authority with local autonomy.
They're not just crushing everyone who was already there.
Nope. Often they brought those local rulers, the elites, into their system.
Smart. Keeps everyone happy.
Right. It's about collaboration, not just domination. And it paid off stability, longevity for the empire.
Local elites got some power. Cholas got a stable empire. Win-win.
Mm-hmm.
But empires aren't just built on paperwork, right? I've heard the Cholas were big into art and culture.
Absolutely. Huge patrons of the arts.
Yeah.
And their architecture, especially their temples, impressive stuff.
Like that Brihadeeswarar Temple.
At Thanjavur, yeah. Testament to their skill, their devotion.
It's the one where they diverted a whole river to bring in sacred Ganges water, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Talk about dedication. These temples, they weren't just for worship. They were symbols of Chola power.
Showcasing their power and their piety.
Exactly. Meant to inspire awe, legitimize their rule.
It's fascinating how they used architecture like that as a tool, building their legacy in stone, literally.
Ooh, got it. And those temples weren't just pretty to look at. They were hubs of learning, art, culture, spreading Chola influence.
Okay, so we've got a powerful navy, clever administrators, amazing builders. What else? How far did their reach actually go?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Their impact, it went way beyond India.
So,
Through all their maritime activity, they spread Indian culture throughout Southeast Asia, religion, language, art, even social customs.
wow. They weren't just building an empire, they were spreading a whole civilization. But how did that happen? Were they forcing people?
No, it wasn't about force. It was gradual through trade, diplomacy, settlements.
More of a soft power approach.
Exactly. They were masters of cultural diplomacy. Sharing their culture, building connections, that's how they solidified their influence.
So it was a two-way street, right? They must have picked up stuff from Southeast Asia, too.
Absolutely. They were open to new ideas, adopting things from other cultures.
It shows how civilizations grow through all that back and forth. Even powerful empires, they're shaped by what's around them.
Exactly. Makes their story even more fascinating. Conquerors, yes, but also ambassadors, traders, borrowers.
It shows that history is never simple, black and white.
It's all about the nuances, the unexpected connections.
And the Cholas, with their maritime power, their cultural outreach, They really embody that complexity.
They really do. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? That balance, keeping their own identity, but also taking in new stuff.
Shows they were adaptable, open to change. You don't last for centuries without that, right?
Totally. And it wasn't just in culture, their administration too. Remember how they integrated those local lords?
Yeah, the win-win thing. Local elites kept some power, Cholas got stability.
Exactly. And it went even deeper than that. They had these village assemblies called sabas,
Village assembly.
basically like local councils,
Yeah.
managing village affairs, taxes, disputes, grassroots democracy, Chola style.
Wow, so they weren't just keeping the big guys happy, they were empowering communities.
It was smart. They understood how to govern a huge, diverse population, give people a voice, they feel ownership, responsibility, makes the whole thing more stable.
It's like a precursor to modern ideas of governance. Kind of cool.
It is. But let's go back to that cultural influence for a sec. You mentioned it's still visible in Southeast Asia today.
Yeah, what are some examples of that?
Well, one of the biggest is the spread of Hinduism and the art, the architecture that came with it,
Okay.
like Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Masterpiece of Khmer architecture. But you look closely, you see those South Indian influences. From the Chola period.
So it wasn't just goods they were trading, it was ideas, religion, artistic styles, like a whole cultural package.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the big stuff, the temples and monuments. It went deeper. The use of Sanskrit in inscriptions, religious texts even, Indian dance, music, elements of the caste system, all found their way into Southeast Asia. Because of those connections, the Cholas built.
So they're like the origin point for all these cultural offshoots.
Yeah, it's like they planted seeds and they grew into these unique hybrid traditions. It shows how dynamic cultural exchange can be, right?
It makes you wonder about those interactions. Were there Chola artists working with local artisans? Scholars sharing ideas? Must have been a fascinating mix.
Oh, definitely. And we get glimpses of it through inscriptions, archaeology, even art and literature that survived, like
Yeah.
piecing together a giant puzzle.
Okay, so we've covered their navy, administration, cultural impact. But what about the other side of empire building? Conquest, expansion. It usually comes at a cost, doesn't it?
That's a good point. And yeah, of course there was resistance. No empire avoids that completely.
Like I said.
There were rebellions in their own territories, challenges from neighboring kingdoms, even pushback from communities in Southeast Asia who wanted to stay independent.
So it wasn't all smooth sailing for them. They had their share of conflict.
Oh, for sure. Maintaining an empire, it's a constant balancing act. Project power, but also manage those who disagree. And the Cholas, they weren't immune to that.
It's a good reminder that history isn't just winners and losers.
Exactly. It's all these competing interests, power struggles back and forth between those who rule and those being ruled.
And the Cholas, with all their achievements and their struggles, they really show us that complexity.
They do.
Now, while we're on the topic of complexity, let's talk religion. I know Hinduism was big for them, but were there other religions around?
Good question. Hinduism was dominant, especially Shaivism, but the Cholas were actually pretty tolerant of other faiths.
Oh, interesting.
There were thriving Jain and Buddhist communities in their territories. They even traded with Islamic communities in the Middle East. Shows a certain openness, wouldn't you say?
So not a one-religion-fits-all situation?
Nope. It's pretty different from a lot of empires where everyone had to follow the same belief system.
It makes you wonder, was it genuine respect for other faiths? Or more about keeping things stable, avoiding conflict?
Good question. Historians still debate that. Probably a mix of both. Pragmatism, genuine respect, and recognizing that diversity can be good for society, for the economy.
So complex motivations again.
Right. And it's another example of how the Cholas defy easy categorization. They make us rethink our assumptions about power, empire, and cultural exchange.
Speaking of rethinking assumptions, I'm curious about their art. We talked about the temples, but what about other stuff? Sculpture, painting, literature.
Another fascinating area. Their artistic achievements, they went way beyond architecture. Chola bronzes, for example, some of the finest metalwork in India.
I've seen pictures, they're incredible.
Yes.
So detailed, so expressive.
They are. These intricate sculptures, often depicting Hindu deities, exquisite craftsmanship, anatomical accuracy, expressive beauty.
But they didn't just do religious figures, right?
No. They also captured scenes from everyday life. Courtly life, processions, dancers, musicians, even ordinary people doing their thing gives us a real window into their world.
It's like we can see their society through those sculptures.
Exactly. And it's not just bronze. Literature flourished too, especially in Tamil. One famous work is the Kalinga Tupurani, a war poem celebrating King Rajendra III's victories.
I've heard of that. But it's a war poem, right?
Hmm.
Kind of unusual to be considered a masterpiece.
You'd think so. War poems, you usually think about glorifying violence. But this one's different. It explores the cost of war, the complexities of power, how fleeting glory can be.
So it's more than just a historical account. It's a work of art with deeper meaning.
Exactly. It shows the sophistication of their literature, their ability to create art that speaks across time and place.
From temples to sculptures to poetry, it's amazing how much they achieved artistically. Shows a real depth of culture, doesn't it?
It does. And it reminds us that the Cholas weren't just about military power and expansion. They were patrons of the arts, builders, cultivators of a rich and complex culture.
It's a side of empires we often forget about. We focus on the wars, but it's the art, the literature that really defines a civilization.
Absolutely. And the Cholas, they are a powerful reminder of that.
It's like they had this whole other side,
Yeah.
not just about conquering, but appreciating art, literature.
Definitely. It shows they were a product of their time, like any empire. But they clearly valued those things: creativity, knowledge, expression.
Makes you think about the average person back then.
Yeah.
What was it like to live in the Chola Empire? Did they benefit from all the wealth, the culture?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hard to say for sure, but we get clues from inscriptions, archaeology, even literature.
And what do those clues tell us? Were people doing okay?
Well, like most empires, there were probably haves and have-nots, the elites, the rich merchants, priests. They definitely lived well.
Makes sense.
But there's also evidence they invested in things that helped everyone. Irrigation, roads.
Well, not just palaces and temples.
Exactly. And that system of local governance, the village assemblies, it suggests people had some say in things, some power.
So it wasn't all bad.
I wouldn't say everyone was living in luxury, but the empire's success probably trickled down to some extent.
That's good to hear. But even great empires, they don't last forever, right? What happened to the Cholas?
It was a slow decline, more than a sudden collapse. Internal problems, succession disputes, powerful factions, it weakened them from within.
Those power struggles, classic empire problem.
Right. And they had external pressure, too. Neighboring kingdoms, like the Pandyas in the south, they were just waiting for a chance to break free.
All empires rise and all empires fall, as they say. But their legacy, that lived on, right?
Absolutely. Their impact on art, architecture, culture, you can still see it in South India, Southeast Asia.
So they left their mark.
They did. Their administrative ideas, their maritime achievements, it all had a lasting impact.
It shows that even when empires crumble, their ideas, their art, it can all keep going, have a ripple effect.
I like that, a ripple effect. And the Cholas, with their military power, their administration, their culture, they're a great example of how empires shape the world and how the world shapes them.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Their navy, their administration, their art, their culture, even their decline.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it? A look into a really important period in Indian history.
I'm still amazed by them, their ambition, the scale of what they achieved. They weren't just rulers, they were visionaries.
And for our listeners, I hope this has inspired you to learn more. Dig deeper into their story, see how much they impacted history.
Because that's what this is all about, right? Sparking curiosity, getting people thinking critically, asking questions.
It's about embracing the complexity of the past. Seeing history as more than just facts and dates, but stories, triumphs, struggles, things we can still relate to today.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Chola Dynasty, a story of maritime power, cultural brilliance, and a legacy that's still inspiring today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those minds open.